Eve looked over the seat at the driver of the car. She smiled. He glanced sideways and responded with a smile. She knew what would happen when they got to her house. Don Stevens guessed it too. He knew he was lucky when she asked if they could leave and come back to her place for a late-night cocktail. Eva considered herself lucky to have found such a pretty boy. She guessed that he was about 25 years old. She, being closer to 30, did not seem to be a problem for him. She wondered about him and how much he knew about sex. Rob Thompson was and remains her only lover. They got married at 19, while still at university. He told her that he had no experience before her when they met. She never knew if it was true, but she accepted it as it was. Now Eve was going to take her second lover. Turn left here. She pointed to a side road. A few more instructions, and then, this house is here. Pull into the driveway. The car stopped gently, and he turned off the ignition. Don unbuckled his seat belt and turned to Eve. He kissed her. "Let's go inside," she said as her seat belt came off. Don ran out of the car as quickly as possible and walked around the passenger seat. He opened the door and took her hand. She looked up, a smile on her face as she stepped onto the path. She led him to the house. As soon as they entered, she turned on the light in the hallway. They made love. For a moment she remembered Rob trying to please her, but not succeeding. Was it because Don was a new man, or was he simply much better than her husband? There was a knock on the front door, and the bell rang and rang. 11 o'clock, bloody o'clock, and I can guess who it is. Who? My ex-husband. Husband? Don't worry, we're divorced and don't live together anymore. He's acting like a nasty guy right now. Sorry, I'll have to deal with him. Don turned and Eve stood up. She grabbed a robe from the back of the door and put it on as she walked out. Okay, I'm going. She could see through the glass panel in the door. Rob looked angry. She opened the door partially. What do you want in the middle of the night? We need to talk. We have nothing to discuss. All conversations were over. Our marriage is over. We are divorced. Rob pushed the door open, and she and Eve moved away. He stepped aside and snatched the door from her hand. We need to settle this once and for all. Eve, I love you and always will. I will do anything to get us back together. We're not going back. Rob, you need to accept that I'm moving on and my life doesn't include you anymore. Please go away. Rob looked, his eyes falling. Are you okay, Eva? Rob looked away. There was Don, 6 feet tall, well-built and looking like he could start something. I'm fine. Rob's leaving. Rob looked at the naked Don, then at Eve. His head dropped and he turned away. Eva closed the door. She saw him still standing, looking inward. When she turned away, Rob could hear what she said. Rob turned away, tears in his eyes. He needed a drink and much more. He's gone, she said. She kissed him. Thank you. For what? Just because you're here with me. I don't know what he could do if I was alone. You are not alone, and I'm glad about that. They continued making love. It was 4 o'clock in the morning when the phone rang. Who the hell could it be? Said Eve as she left the bed. She turned sideways as she placed the phone to her ear. Don looked at the woman several years older than him, who had the physical form of a young athlete. Hi. No, we can't. No, I don't want to sit and talk. Our marriage is over. Because I'm dating someone else. The reason is that for the last 7 I received more hours than you gave me in a month. I don't have anything else to tell you, so don't ever call again. Eva turned off the phone and left it on the table. Don smiled. I assume it was your ex-husband. Yes, and let this scoundrel know his place. Don started to get ready. I need to go and get ready for work. I'll be gone for a few days. I will call you. Eva walked him to the door and stood there waving at him as he got into the car and drove away. Derek Armstrong, who lived across the street, turned away when he saw his neighbor naked. Kind morning, Derek. Have a nice day. Nice day, he replied, just looking up. I found myself a new guy, Eve said, sitting with her best friend Lucy. During lunch break, they found themselves in the cafeteria eating soup and bun. Boyfriend, you just kicked that useless husband out of the house a week ago. Yes, and I'm glad I did. This guy is fantastic in bed. So what's his name and where is he from? His name is Don Stevens, and I think he said he lives somewhere near Markham. Oh, said Lucy. What? Look, Eva, I'm not sure, but I think I know Don. Where? Well, if it's him, then he's a friend of my cousin Ralph. It can't be. He's 30-something, brown hair. Does he have a small scar under his left eye? Yes, he said it was a work injury. That's him. Tell me what you know. Not much, but I can ask Ralph. They met again in the dining room the next day. What news? Well, I don't know how to say this, but Don Stevens is married and has 2 children. Are you sure? Eve asked, not wanting to believe that her new lover was a deceiver and a liar. 2 people I asked about him said the same thing. Eve's face turned red. Damn deceiver and traitor. He will not be in my bed again. Eve, listen, maybe he and his wife are already divorced, Lucy tried to console her. Maybe there is some explanation. Isn't that where you're thinking, Lucy? Eve was indignant. This bastard cheated on his wife with me, and now he's making up excuses to cheat on me. None of this. We're done with him. Eve knew where to find the man who was going to become her former lover. His phone rang twice before he picked it up. Hello, Eva. How are you? She tried to keep her voice as stable as she could. Hi, Dawn. Can I ask you something? Of course, shoot. Dawn, how are your wife and children? Okay, why did you ask? Well, I want to know how your wife and kids fit into our relationship. They don't do that, or they won't when I leave Shelley. And when will it be? Listen, Eva, you have to understand that my marriage hasn't been going well for a long time. I love you and want to be with you, but I need to find the right time to tell Shelley about this. By this time, Eve was already smoking. Stop it, don't. You cheated on your wife with me, and now you find excuses to cheat on me. Nothing happens. We're done with you. But, no buts. I don't want to be treated like a woman of easy virtue. Go away. I never want to talk to you again. Eva threw the phone on the table. He rolled over the edge and fell to the floor with a loud crash. To hell, she sighed, bending over to pick up the phone. That's all I needed. Eva put the phone in her bag and left the dining room. She was deeply excited and did not even notice the stranger on the side of the road. He tried to turn, but it was too late and they both fell. Eve screamed in pain as her knee hit the asphalt. Are you okay? Asked the stranger. Eve wiped her tears and nodded. Sorry, I wasn't thinking. But are you okay? He asked. Eve looked at him. He was a man, maybe 5 or 10 years older than her, but God, how attractive he was. My knee is killing me. He looked at his knee. Oh my God, he said. His accent was quite refined. We need to get you to the hospital. Did something happen, Jerry? Unnoticed by any of them, Bentley stopped nearby. The window went down. My dear Doreen, this young lady has a wound. We need to take her to the hospital. Oh, poor thing. Can you bring her to the car? Jerry looked at Eve. Do you think you can? Eve nodded. Jerry helped her into the back seat and sat in the front. What's your name, dear? Doreen asked as they set off. Eva Thompson. Look, my leg isn't that bad. All I need is plaster. You can give me a lift and I can go home. Nonsense, dear, said Doreen. Listen, why don't I come and see us? I did a bit of nursing in my younger years. I should be able to handle a few cuts and bruises. Eve was puzzled that Doreen didn't have a crystal accent like her partner. I'm Doreen Harmer, And this is my husband, Gerald. Please meet us both, and I'm so sorry. It was entirely my fault." "Problems?" asked Gerald. "I just broke up with my boyfriend. Found out that this lying bastard is married." "Oh my God," Doreen said as she turned off the main road. Eve saw several very large houses ahead and was not surprised when Doreen turned onto a wide and long road. A few minutes later, Eva sat while Doreen cleaned her wound and bandaged the cut. "See, Jerry can still feel." "You always liked it, my love. A cup of tea." "Best idea. A cup of tea for our friend will make her feel good," Jerry suggested, getting up and leaving. Doreen sat down next to her. "Do you want to ask?" "What?" "How could it be that a man like Gerald Harmer, so handsome, is married to an ordinary Doreen, who is 8 years older than him? Did I do something wrong?" "Well, if you hadn't, you would have been first. And no, it's not because of my money, it's all." Doreen waved her hand around the room. Gerald returned with a silver tray, bone cups, a teapot, a sugar bowl, and a milk jug. He placed them on the coffee table. Gerald left as Doreen began pouring tea. Gerald returned with a plate of biscuits, which he placed next to the tea set. They sat drinking tea. Eve had the best chance to look at Gerald. He was handsome, but there was something else. Something told me that here he is a man who is pleased with himself. She wondered why he should be married to Doreen, a woman who was several years older than him, beautiful, but certainly not in the same league in looks as her husband. "So, Eve, tell us a little about yourself." Eve lowered her cup and smiled. "I'm 29, recently divorced, and I found out that the man I thought was my boyfriend is married. That's why I didn't think twice when I bumped into you. I'm so sorry." "I take it you work to live?" asked Doreen. "Yes, she's a paralegal." "You are working." "Young and Granger, do you know them?" "Yes, they are our lawyers and have been for many years," Gerald said. "I feel better now. Can one of you take me home, please?" Eve said. 3 hours had passed since her arrival, and the shock and pain of her fall had already passed. "Of course, I'll take you home," Doreen said. Everyone stood up. Gerald kissed her. Eve was quite surprised. "It was nice meeting you. If we ever meet again, let it be under better circumstances." "I'll definitely take care of it." Eve smiled at the handsome man. Doreen chatted along the road as she drove. Eve added a few words, but she couldn't stop thinking about Gerald. If only he weren't married, if only... Eve was still dreaming when the car stopped. "Take care of yourself, my dear," Doreen said, leaning over and kissing Eve on the lips. Eve was surprised by this friendly gesture. "Be sure to put on a clean bandage tomorrow," Doreen shouted, moving away. A few days later, Eve allowed herself a long lunch break. She bought flowers from the flower shop next to the office and went to Doreen and Gerald. Smiling, she rang the doorbell. Doreen opened it. "Eve, how nice to see you. Is this for me?" "Yes, that's a thank you for all your kindness." "Come in. It's so nice of you to stop by." Doreen led her into the house and into the kitchen. "Sit down and I'll put them in the water." Doreen busied herself with putting the flowers in a glass vase. "So glad you stopped by. I was thinking about contacting you. I have something we need to talk about." "We have to. Let me finish here and I'll get the kettle ready." Eve was intrigued by what Doreen said. She watched the older woman as she moved around the room. "How are you feeling now, dear?" "Okay, my leg is healing well. Thank you, and I feel such a fool for what happened. This is our happiness, dear. The opportunity to make a new friend." Doreen put the teapot and cups on the table. Eve watched as she added milk to cups and poured tea. Doreen sat down next to Eve. "I have a question for you, and if you say no, I will never mention it again." "Sounds ominous. What is it?" "Let me tell you a little about Gerald and me." Doreen finished her drink and sat back. You've probably already guessed that Gerald is several years younger than me. 12 to be exact. He is rich, smart, and very handsome, and I love him with all my heart. Don't get me wrong, it's all his money, not mine. I was a humble teacher before we met. He was the one running after me. Here's the thing, he likes sex, and a lot of it. I can give him as much as I can, but not as much as he wants. I'm asking, will you sleep with Gerald? I don't just mean sex for its own sake. Both Gerald and I always wanted children, but it's never going to happen, you know, I can't get pregnant. We talked about adoption and surrogacy, and then you showed up, and Gerald was quite impressed with you. I know it means a lot, but will you think about it? Doreen leaned back, gasping for breath after speaking the words in one long stream without holding her breath. She looked at Eve and smiled. Eve sat with her mouth open. She had words in her mind, but they no longer fit, and new ones appeared, and more. Thanks for the tea. I'd better go. Please don't go. I didn't mean to offend you. Please think about it. Doreen wanted to say more when the door closed. Eve was shaking as she returned to work. A huge gin and tonic soon passed her lips, followed by 2 more. Eve did not sleep all night. Her anger did not allow her to calm down. She raged all the next day. She was so annoyed that she had to stop and rewrite the entire court report. How dare they? My body is not for sale. 2 days passed, and Eve calmed down to the point where Doreen's words did not intrude on her every thought. It was strange that now she saw herself with Gerald. What was even stranger was that Doreen was sitting next to her, holding her hand. She saw herself walking down the main street with a huge bulge on his stomach. Eve, let me introduce you to Mr. Devon Arthur. He is the lawyer we hired for the Loft House case. Eve looked up and saw Devon's smiling face. Call me Devon, he said, holding out his hand to her. She took it without getting up. Nice to meet you, Mr. Arthur. Look, Eve, why don't you take Mr. Arthur to the conference room and start with a briefing on the case? Sitting next to him while she looked through the papers gave Eve the opportunity to get a good look at him. Although he was black, his nose was quite normal. He had a thin face with dark eyes under shallow eyebrows. His hair was curly, but well-groomed. Eve pressed her thighs together as she sat and listened to him. His quiet, deep voice was very pleasant to her. She was pleased with herself, giving answers to all his questions. Little did she know that Devon was struggling to control his emotions while looking at her. Listen, Eve, I don't know if you're single or in a relationship, but maybe you'd like to have lunch with me as a token of gratitude for your efficiency. Eve smiled, efficiency or not. The dinner was a preface to their future relationship. It was an invitation from a black man to occupy her. He did it. They slept together. Mr. Arthur was due to fly to Jamaica. His father is dead and his mother is ill. Mr. Clarkson will take over the case now. Eve was shocked to learn that her new lover would not return. The worst part was that the new lawyer was a man in his 50s, married with 6 children. Hello, Roman 4. How are you? Eve turned to see Doreen smiling. Chance meeting. Eve visited the mall very rarely during her lunch break. Okay, very good, she said, knowing it wasn't true. She didn't have a man for 3 months. It wasn't because there weren't offers. There certainly were, but none of them attracted her enough to keep her interested. Listen, said Doreen, forget what I said the last time we met. Can we go out for coffee and just be friends? Eve smiled. I can understand if you say no. Coffee will be good, as long as you buy me a big, delicious cupcake. Come along, my dear. Doreen grabbed her hand and led her to a cozy cafe. You sit and I'll order. The second cup was drunk, and they were still talking. Doreen, you know what you were talking about when I was at your house, that I could give birth to a child for you. Yes, but I thought it wouldn't happen. Well, yeah, but I thought about it, and, well, I'd like to try. Would you? Yes, but I need to be alone with Gerald so we can get to know each other before we have sex. Okay, what do you want to do? I know it sounds crazy, but I'd like him to take me to London for the weekend. Just him and me. No sex, just being together. I think that's a very good idea. After all, you don't want to sleep with a man you barely know, do you? In 2 weeks, on Friday, Eve was packing her suitcase. She chose the sexiest lingerie she owns, several dresses and casual clothes for the day. She looked at her watch. He'll be here in an hour. Eve felt a little giddy at the thought of a weekend with the very handsome Gerald. Her heart froze when the bell rang. She hastened to answer. A smiling face greeted Gerald as the door swung open. Eve, it's so nice to see you again, he said, kissing her on both cheeks. It's so good to see you, Gerald, she said, inhaling it after shaving. She scolded herself for how she felt when he stepped back. Are you ready? He asked. More than ever. Then give me your suitcase and we can go. Eve looked at Gerald when he turned out of her driveway. He looked at her and smiled. We must take the road to Dalston and then join the highway at Junction 22. Eve nodded. I've booked us into a room at the Red Lion in Scanty Abbey, a double room. It was a non-negotiable statement. Doreen and Gerald's expectations were that he and Eve would be as intimate as any couple, without the need for full-on sex. The conversation flowed as Gerald drove along the highway. Most were trivial conversations passed between two adults. There were no hints or talk of a sexual relationship. Eve still wasn't sure if she wanted this. Do you want to stop for a break? We could have coffee or tea, whatever, he asked. Sure, tea would be nice. 3 miles should be short enough. In fact, Eve was ready to get to her destination, but she really needed to go to the toilet. A cup of coffee, and they're on their way again. It was already past noon when he pulled into the Red Lion parking lot. Eve came out and stretched. Gerald took both suitcases from the car. She followed him through the main doors. Eve saw that the bar area was filled with diners. The smiling girls stood behind the reception desk. Good afternoon, sir, madam. Gerald Harmer, do you have a number for us? Yes, sir, number 6. May I ask you to sign here? Young lady, Gemma Fernier. It says on her badge. Handed the card to Gerald. He took a pen from the counter and began to write. Would you like the morning paper? Telegraph, please, he said. And you, madam? No thanks. Lunch service is in full swing. I can reserve a table for you if you'd like. Yes, please, in half an hour, he said, looking at Eve. Very good, sir. Gemma looked at her screen. Everything is ready, sir. In an hour and a half, table for 2. Eve passed the key through the reader and the door lock clicked. She pressed the handle and the door swung open under her weight. Gerald followed her. The room was large enough, but the huge bed dominated. There's plenty of room, my dear, he said. After lunch, they decided to take a walk. Do you want to hold my hand? She asked. That would be nice. They walked hand in hand along the narrow streets, stopping to look into store windows when something attracts their attention. After an hour of walking, they returned to the hotel. Bar or room? He asked. Room, please. I need to rest. They lay next to each other in their underwear. There was a safe distance between them. It didn't take long before he fell asleep and began to snore quietly. Eve wasn't far behind. They woke up when Gerald's phone rang. Sorry, love. I should have called as soon as we arrived, but we had to hurry to find food. Eve propped herself up on her elbow, listening to Doreen talking on the other end of the line. She wants to talk to you, he said before handing over the phone. Eve picked up the phone. Hey, Doreen. Yes, I'm fine. We're having a great time. Eve listened as Doreen asked several questions, barely answering. I'll give it back to you. Hey, love. Yes, we will. Bye. The dinner was a pleasant affair, and they drank a bottle of wine. I don't need any more, or I'll be drunk, said Eve. Me too. Quite a tiring day, and I need a good night's sleep." They agreed and went to get ready for bed. Eve stood in her bra and panties, brushing her teeth. She expected Gerald to appear behind her at any minute, but this never happened. He sat on the bed, waiting for his turn. "Are you wearing pajamas?" she asked. "Well, no, we always sleep naked." "Oh, me too. You don't mind because I found it more comfortable?" "No, not at all. Do as you see fit." Gerald came out of the bathroom. Eve was already under the blankets. The sheet was pulled up to her chest, and she held it in place with her hands as she read a magazine. She tried not to look as Gerald took off his shorts. She watched as he folded them. She could no longer concentrate. When he got into bed, she put down the magazine, turned on her side, and turned off the nightlight. She lay there as Gerald rolled around on the bed. Eve lay there, her eyes open, looking into the dark room. She felt the warmth of a body next to her. She turned and rose up on her elbow. "Gerald, are you awake?" "Yes. Is something wrong?" "Yeah, I can't keep doing this." Gerald stood up on his elbows. "You can't do this. Do you want to leave?" "No, I can't lie here in bed with a man and do nothing." They made love. For another 2 weeks, she would never suspect that she was pregnant. They drove home with smiles on their faces, not many words between them. Soon Gerald turned the car into the driveway of his house. Doreen stood and waited for them. She kissed them both before Gerald took the suitcases out of the trunk. "Did you have a good time?" "My love, very good," he said, looking at Eve for a moment. "You did it?" Gerald nodded. "I'm sorry, Doreen. It was me. I couldn't stop. I just had to do it. I know what we were talking about, but I got carried away, and he's a very handsome man. If you get pregnant, my dear, I will forgive everything you two have done. Now I'm thinking about how to arrange sleep. Ah, but first I think you will need to freshen up after your journey." "I need you to sign some papers," Doreen said, standing up from the dinner table. "Papers?" asked Eva. "It's all about the child, if he is alone." "Fine. I'll just clear the table. You and Gerald sit in the living room, and I'll bring coffee soon." Doreen went into the kitchen, and Eve and Gerald went into the living room. They were sitting next to each other. "Do you know what's the matter?" asked Eva. "Just standard stuff. Just to make sure that when the baby is born, he or she will be our baby. We entrusted all the work to a lawyer." Eva smiled. She reached out and took his hand. "We had a good weekend, didn't we?" "We had a very good weekend." Doreen came in with a tray of coffee and an envelope on the side. She busied herself arranging the cups and then poured the coffee. Eve kept her eyes on the envelope and followed Doreen as she opened the package. "This is a legal document that gives us, Gerald and I, paternity of the child. You read it and then put your happy signature at the bottom of each page." Eve sat and read while Doreen and Gerald drank coffee. She looked up. "Okay, I think it's okay. You can sign, then we will do the same." That night, Eve and Gerald lay in bed. "You will sleep with me for the next 3 weeks. Do you think you can hold out?" Only one way to find out. Eva went to work as usual, returning to Doreen and Gerald's house every evening. "Are there any signs that you are pregnant?" Doreen asked. "I haven't taken the test yet, but I will in the morning." Eve didn't need to use a pregnancy test. She knew she was pregnant. After the night she took a test. No wonder she was pregnant. Doreen hugged her and kissed her on the cheek. "We need to take you to a doctor to confirm." Eva made an appointment and received a confirmation 3 days later. "Now, my dear, Gerald's work is finished. I moved you to a spare room. I hope you like it." "Oh, I was expecting to go back to my house." "No, no, darling, you will stay with us. Then we can be sure that you eat and sleep well. Trust me, it will be better for mother and child." 3 weeks, and Eva lay in bed. Her book lay across her chest as she stared at the ceiling. She touched her stomach. It made no difference. but she knew that a new life had begun. She jumped when the door opened. Doreen came in. "Eva, dear, we have been rather neglectful of you these last few weeks. Will you come with me? I think, Gerald, there's something for you." Doreen held out her hand as Eva pulled back the blanket. Doreen smiled when she saw Eva naked. Hand in hand, she led Eve into the master bedroom. 3 in bed became the norm until Eve's time came. A month before her expected due date, Eva moved back into the guest room. The child was born at home. It was a girl. Doreen insisted that Eva stay in bed for 2 days after giving birth. "Now, dear, we found you a place in the city. It's just a short walk from your office. Nice and cozy, with easy access to shops. The fee we agreed on was paid into your bank account, so you're quite a rich woman. If you want to pack your things, I'll arrange a taxi." Eve looked at Doreen with a blank stare after she stopped talking. "It's all in the agreement you signed." Eva barely remembered the words. She also remembered to never contact Doreen or Gerald again. "So that's how it is. I'm leaving here and never seeing you or my child again. Your child, and yes, you won't see us again." With tears in her eyes, Eva packed what little she had into her suitcase. Doreen carried out her to the door. She smiled at Eve as the door closed. Eva cried until the taxi arrived. The driver helped her with her suitcase. He took the key from her and carried the suitcase up the stairs. Eve wiped her eyes and looked around. She had a 2-room apartment above the shops on the street, leading off the main shopping arcade. It was well furnished, and she could smell the new carpet. The kitchen was well equipped with a washing machine and dryer. A long island table sat in the middle of the room. The refrigerator and freezer were stocked with everything she would need for several weeks. There was even wine in the wine rack. Some of it was of very good quality. She sat down on the sofa and cried. It didn't take long before she drank half the contents of the bottle of red wine and fell asleep on the sofa. Eve didn't know what to do when she woke up in the middle of the night. She could go back to work, but just the thought of it made her feel uncomfortable. They had to know that she was pregnant, but how could they explain to her that she was a surrogate mother? A phone call, and everything was resolved. She would start working in a week. On Monday, it was too fast for her. On Monday, she got up very early. She sat at the dressing table and applied makeup. She wanted to look her best, so she took the time to do her party makeup instead of just putting on lipstick. Eve's breasts were still swollen and irritating. She was assured that it would pass. She lined the bra with padding that Doreen had given her. The work turned out better than she expected. Everyone was friendly, and no one asked too many questions that would make her feel uncomfortable. Life went on, and Eve needed to find a social life. "What's up for you this weekend, Lucy?" "Jerry and I are going to a club. Why do you ask?" "I just wanted to have a good evening. I came back here 6 weeks ago and haven't even set foot in the house yet." "Look, come with us, and we will find you a boyfriend." "I'm not sure yet that I want someone in my life." "Not necessarily. Have a few drinks and dance, and then you can go home. We'll pick you up at 7 on Friday night, okay?" "Are you sure Jerry won't mind?" "No, he just does what he's told. Otherwise, he won't get anything." Eva laughed. It was Friday night, and Eva was ready long before the appointed time. Her breasts have shrunk to normal size. She stood and looked at herself in the long bedroom mirror. She cursed, realizing that she needed to clean herself up. Luckily for her, she still had an hour before Lucy arrived. She remembered the time when she was with Doreen and Gerald Child. Eve stopped and looked into the distance. One day she will know her daughter, and she will have time to explain everything. Eve jumped when the doorbell rang. She stood up with a clutch in her hand. Quickly descending the stairs, the door opened in front of a smiling Lucy. "Hey, come on, we're a little late. There is one more passenger," she said as Eve locked the door. As she approached, she saw a man sitting in a car. Eva was pleasantly surprised. The man sitting next to him was very handsome and looked very athletic. "Eve, This is Ray. She soon learned that Ray was a self-employed electrician, single, never married, and had his own house and villa in France. He soon learned that she worked as a paralegal and was now divorced. She never told him about her daughter. Eva collapsed on the sofa. It was a wonderful night, and she danced with Ray until they left. She held a card in her hand. "If you want to spend another night, call me," he said and kissed her. Eva was disappointed. He didn't try to be close to her and didn't even offer to go to his house. The next morning, her phone beeped. "Good morning. You enjoyed last night, Ray." She smiled, still wondering how he got her number. "Good morning. Had a great night. We'll have to do this again soon." "What are you doing this afternoon?" "Nothing. Why do you ask?" "Would you like some coffee? I finish work around 2. "Great idea." Eve stopped herself. "Why don't you come over to my place and I'll make us lunch?" "Great idea. See you at 2. By 2 o'clock, Eva had taken a shower, put on her makeup, and had prepared dinner well. She almost fell down the stairs when the bell rang. "Hello." He kissed her on the cheek and handed her a bouquet of flowers. "Thank you. Get up." Shit, she thought, realizing that her skirt was so short that he would be able to see her ass when she moved higher. "Slow down, girl, not too fast so as not to scare him away," she thought. "Sorry, but I was late and didn't have time to change." No problem, honestly, Eve might reproach herself. Damn stupid words. Ray took a step, looking down her skirt. He put his hand on the step and looked up when Eve turned around. "I made lasagna. I hope you like it." "I love it very much. It's one of my favorites. Listen, do you mind if I wash my face first?" "No problem. The bathroom is over there. I'll get you a towel." Eva took a towel from the dryer. She went into the bathroom without knocking. Ray stood at the sink. He was bare-chested. One hand was raised as he cleaned his armpit. Eve stopped and looked at him through the mirror. He wasn't a bodybuilder, but he had enough strength to show that he worked hard. Ray smiled when he saw her reflection. "If I had known, I would have brought a change of clothes. I live 10 miles away, and that would make me even late." "Dinner is ready when you are," she said, having to look away before doing anything with it. "Wait a minute." They sat and ate. Ray told her more about his life. "Ray, I know we only know each other, but if we want to continue seeing each other, then you need to know something." Ray stopped eating, realizing that this was something important, very important. He put down his knife and fork and turned to her. "Ray, I had a baby 6 weeks ago." His jaw dropped, fearing the worst. "I gave birth to a child and gave it away." "For adoption?" he asked, leaning forward and placing his hand on hers. "No, I was a surrogate mother." He tried to smile. "Thank God, I thought you were telling me the poor thing was dead." "No, I just miss her, and I know I'll never see her again." Lunch was forgotten. Eve sat as Ray hugged her. "Suppose you don't want anything to do with me now." "Why do you think so?" "Because I gave away my child." "No, I think it's a very noble thing to do. Some women cannot have children, but you have made the family very happy." "But why am I so sad?" "It's clear. The connection between mother and child and everything that comes with it." Eve looked at Ray. "You need to take a shower," she said, looking at him. They made love. This was not their only night together. "Eva, you need to take a vacation from work." "Why?" "I'll take you to my villa." Eva smiled. "Maybe I'm too curious, but tell me, how can such a young man own a villa in France?" "Well, it was Mom and Dad's villa until they couldn't travel anymore, so he gave it to me." "Oh my God, I thought you were super rich." "No, but what I do pays well." Eva climbed out of the pool. She stood there for a moment, water dripping from her naked body. Ray walked through the door with 2 drinks in his hand. She found it strange that he was wearing shorts. He placed the drinks on the table between the lounge chairs. He approached Eve as she took a towel. He took it from her. He knelt down. "Eva Thompson, love of my life, will you marry me?" Eve looked down at him. A smile spread across her face. "Yes, I will marry you." Ray took a box from his shorts pocket, opened it, and took out a diamond engagement ring. He took her hand and placed the ring on her finger. He stood. They hugged and kissed. The wedding was small, with close friends and relatives on both sides. Eva found herself pregnant 3 weeks after their honeymoon. They now have 4 girls and are living a happy life. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.